Hey Five! So yesterday I read the first half of this book called The Marble Crusher by Michael Murpurgo, and we learnt about a boy called Albert who was new to school, and another boy called Sid and his friends were telling him lots of lies, and he believed them all. And he told Albert that the head teacher would crush any marbles that he finds. So that's what he thinks is going to happen. Let's carry on and see what happens next. Back at home, Albert had his own collection of marbles, but they were so ordinary marbles. They were silver ball bearings. He had 75 of them now, pea-size to conker size. They were all lined up on the mantelpiece above his bed. Everyone at school had glass marbles, but no one else had silver ball bearings. Albert was very proud of them. Over half-term, Albert polished them till they shone, and the day school began he took 6 of the big ones with him into school. They were cold and heavy in his pocket. And what a sensation they created! Albert was very good at marbles, and he knew he was particularly good with his silver ones. Over rough ground they kept to a truer line than a glass one, and they often bounced off. So by lunchtime he had won 10 marbles. One of them was a blood red, a lovely deep red marble, highly prized because there was a white mist gliding around inside it. Of course, everyone wanted to play Albert to try and win one of his silver marbles, but Albert chose the rough ground and he outplayed them all every time. It was in reading time after lunch that Sid Creedy challenged him to play marbles, but inside the classroom. Albert didn't really want to. He preferred the long distances and the potholes of the playground, but he did not want to upset his friends, so he agreed. In the excitement of the game, he quite forgot Mr. Manners' rule about playing marbles inside the school. Even on the smooth floor, in amongst the chairs, Albert went on winning. He was crouching under the teacher's table, taking careful aim, when Mr. Manners came in behind him, silently. "Albert," he said, "are you playing marbles?" "Oh, yes, sir," said Albert, remembered at once. He remembered he wasn't allowed. He remembered the punishment too, and he began to twiddle his hair. Mr. Manners, looking very cross. "They will all have to go, all of them," said Mr. Manners. "Empty your pockets, lad." And he held out his big chalky hand. "I'm surprised at you, Albert, and disappointed, very disappointed." Albert took them out of his pocket one by one and dropped them into Mr. Manners' hand. His winnings went first, the blood red too, and then, last of all, his 6 great heavy silver ball bearings. It was as if his blood was being taken from him. The fist closed before his eyes and his marbles were gone. "A pity, Albert," Mr. Manners said, shaking his head. "A terrible pity. Lovely marbles too. But you were warned. And we cannot have people breaking school rules now, can we?" "No, sir," said Albert, wondering how long it would be before his marbles went through the crusher, how much longer they had to live. "Hard luck," said Sid, when Mr. Manners had gone. "You can only just hear the machine bat," he went on. "It's all modern and silent." "You mean the marble crusher?" said Albert, blinking back his tears. Sid nodded. "I'm afraid so. They're goners, but 10 minutes and they'll be dust. It's Japanese, very efficient." Albert went home that afternoon miserable. He could not bear to think of his beautiful silver marbles being ground down to dust. He was crying bitter tears by the time he reached the front door. He cried up against his mother's apron, and in between the heaving and the snivelling, his mother heard the whole story of Mr. Manners' terrible machine, how it was unfair, how he would never see his 6 silver marbles again, and all the blood red one, how he hated Mr. Manners, all the teachers, and everyone at the school, including the dinner ladies. This time Albert's mother had to listen. She was inside the school gates within 5 minutes, still in her apron, dragging Albert along by his hand. Albert did not want to go. He did not want her to make a fuss. He did not want to be hauled red-eyed and snivelling through the school gates. Albert's mother never even knocked on the staff room door. She burst into the room, her eyes searching for the headmaster. Mr. Manners was halfway to his mouth with a cup of tea, and the other teachers sat around him, not quite knowing where to look. "Mr. Manners," she stormed, "I sent my son to your school because I thought you would look after him and care for him. And what happens? Albert tells me you have taken away his collection of marbles and you have destroyed them with some horrible machine. Albert calls it a marble crusher or some such thing. Never in all my days have I heard of such a cruel going on inside a school. I'm telling you the authorities are going to hear about this. You haven't heard the last of this, Mr. Manners. If this is how teachers treat children these days. She went on and on and on. Mr. Manners had to put down his teacup and was holding up his hand, much in the same way a policeman might try and stop traffic. Sorry, slight interruption there. Mr. Manners said, I think there has been some misunderstanding. I certainly did confiscate Albert's marbles. Confiscated? Confiscated? You crushed them, Mr. Manners, not confiscated them. Mr. Manners frowned. Did Albert tell you that? And Mr. Manners looked down at Albert. Albert was completely bewildered. Never had he seen his mother this angry. He twiddled his hair furiously until his mother slapped his hand away. That's what Albert told me, she said, and my son is no liar, Mr. Manners. He would not invent things like that. He's not like that. Oh, I know, said Mr. Manners, and he turned to Albert. Now tell me, Albert, who told you about this machine, this marble crusher? Sid, sir, said Albert. Sid Creedy. He said you've got a great big marble crusher under your desk. He said all the marbles you take away are crushed to dust. Japanese, he said it was. Very efficient. Mr. Manners was nodding and he was smiling too. And what else does he say, Albert? Slowly, very slowly, the truth was beginning to dawn. Albert was beginning to understand. The teachers around were all smiling. He knew Sid Creedy had been lying to him and he wanted his own back. He said you've got 6 wives, sir, like Henry VIII, and you've got 22 children, and you've got 2 more on the way, and that Mr. Cooper's an escaped monk. Mr. Cooper? Tell me, are you an escaped monk? Said Mr. Manners. Mr. Cooper smiled at Albert and ruffled his hair. No, he said, I've never been a monk, and the way I feel about Sidney Creedy just now, I don't think I'd ever qualify. But Mr. Manners, what about you? We've only ever met one of your wives and 2 of your 22 children. Where do you keep all the others? So the whole web of lies was unravelled in front of him. Albert saw his mother laughing with them, and he felt ashamed of himself about his stupidity. But Mr. Manners put a comforting arm around him. Never you mind, Albert, he said. It seems to me you have a nice trusting nature, and it also seems to me that I shall have to teach Master Sidney Creedy a lesson. The next morning, after assembly, Mr. Manners made them all sit down in the school hall. He had something to say, something very important. He put his hand on his hips and cleared his throat. Teachers can be wrong, children, he began. Like anyone else, they can be wrong from time to time. And I was wrong to confiscate Albert's marbles yesterday. You see, in the heat of the moment, I quite forgot that it takes 2 people to play marbles, doesn't it? Now I can't remember, so I'm going to have to ask whoever was playing marbles with yesterday to stand up. Albert looked down at the floor and twiddled his hair. Everyone else looked at Sid Creedy, so he had to stand up. Sid Creedy, said Mr. Manners, nodding slowly. Well, Sid, it seems only fair that I also confiscate your marbles. I think that's the only right thing to do, don't you? Sid said nothing. You'd better come here, Sid, said Mr. Manners, and reluctantly Sid poured a bagful of marbles into Mr. Manners' hand. Nice ones, said Mr. Manners, examining them closely. What a pity, what a terrible pity. And then he went out. Sid Creedy came back and sat down next to Albert. Will he put them in the marble crusher? Albert whispered. Don't be silly, Bert. Sid Creedy was irritated. Course not, you dumb Herbert. There's no such thing as a marble crusher. I was having you on, wasn't I? You'd believe anything I tell you, wouldn't you? From down the corridor came a distant electrical hum like a muffled power drill. It lasted for a few seconds, and then there was a long silence. They heard the staff room door slam, and then Mr. Manners' crisp footsteps coming back down towards the school hall. There, he said as he shut the door behind him. That's that, then. He was holding 2 paper bags. One he gave to Albert, and one he gave to Sid. They've just been through the marble crusher, he said. They're just like sand now. And he spoke to the whole school. Well, children, he said, you can now see that you would be very well advised to never play marbles inside my school again. If you do, it will merely mean more work from my marble crusher. It's Japanese, you know. Very efficient. Do you think he really crushed the marbles? Or do you think he may have given Sid some sand in a bag and told him it was his marbles? Who knows? But that head teacher has definitely taught Sid a lesson not to wind your friends up. Hope you enjoyed the book.